Well, welcome back. Thursday, February 20th, 2020. If you watched the debate last night, you noticed two things. The Democratic National Committee is so desperate to stop Bernie Sanders that they will trade their soul, or at least their stated soul, for victory. This they have always done, at least since about 1981. Racism, it matters, unless you are the governor of Virginia and a Democrat. Sexual abuse, it matters unless you are the lieutenant governor of Virginia and a Democrat, or Bill Clinton, or Ted Kennedy. Campaign finance reform and getting money out of politics, it matters unless you are a Clinton who knows how to leverage nonprofits and international donations. And none of the above matter if you are the one last best hope to stop Bernie Sanders and your name is Michael Bloomberg. But what you had to notice last night is arrogance is not acuity of mind, and wealth is not a predictor of the quickness of tongue. I've told you for months now, don't worry about Bloomberg. He's as exciting as watching a turtle. Last night, where he knew he had to be prepared for the onslaught, saw him basically, well, without acuity of mind or quickness of tongue. I just don't think there is any stopping Bernie now. The Democrats have played footsie with the left and socialism so long it has now reached its teleology with an actual self-described socialist. When Dennis Prager says, as he said this morning, the Democrats have no great candidates because with their worldviews, they cannot have great candidates, he was absolutely right. Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren aren't that different than Sanders in what they say, and Joe Biden bent their way to be acceptable to the base of the party, trading in his moderate credentials long ago. So why go with the imitators when you get the real thing in Sanders, the honest thing? So you noticed Bloomberg is a giant nothing. The other thing you had to realize was that something has slowly and then quickly happened in the Democratic Party. Just as it has started to discount actual rights from the First and Second Amendment to others, it has invented and now claimed ipse dixit a whole set of new rights they claim are absolute rights, as if there can be and should be no debate about them being fundamental rights. Paid vacation, maternity leave, free health care, permanent full employment. The list can go on and on. Such things are now placed on par with human rights. But oh, wait 1 minute. When did they actually care about human rights? Do they ever talk about the torture that Amnesty International has documented in Iran, the mass slaughters of protesters, the cribbing of women's rights? Or do they care more about condemning the American president for not giving such countries money and giving those countries not giving those countries free passes? Do they speak of the child and slave labor that exists in China? Do they speak of the imprisonment of millions of Muslims in China simply because they are Muslims? Or do they rather condemn the American president for being a bigot? Do they condemn the Chinese government, or do they condemn the American president for putting sanctions on China? This morning, Victor Davis Hanson wrote, quote, "China is currently in a dangerous, chaotic state. And why not? When a pre-modern authoritarian society leaps wildly into the brave new world of high-tech science in a single generation. The Chinese technological revolution is overseen by an Orwellian dictatorship. Predictably, the Chinese Communist Party has not developed the social, political, or cultural infrastructure to ensure that its sophisticated industrial and biological research does not go rogue and become destructive to itself and to the billions of people who are on the importing end of Chinese products and protocols. Central Party officials run the government, military, media, and universities collectively in a manner reminiscent of the science fiction Borg organism of Star Trek, which was a horde of robot-like entities all under the control of one central mind. But if you listen to the Democrats, the Blame America First Democrats, the threat to human rights is in this country. Nary a peep about other countries where real human rights are not just at discount, but seen as a joke, truly a laughing matter, or worse. We can all watch the mini-series Chernobyl and ask ourselves how modernity could let that happen, and yet here we are, watching something even more modern ignore it all over again, and again, and again, making Donald Trump the dictator. That's actually what they call him. In, of course, a free press that publishes their statements that he is a dictator and a tyrant, making me wonder if the left and the Democrats don't know their common nouns anymore, or if power is so important they are just willing to distort and change their meanings. Meanwhile, people suffer. Confucius put it that when words lose their meaning, people lose their liberty. I dedicated my monologue yesterday to the issue of moderation, the Aristotelian mean in politics. I'd like to flesh it out a bit more on this front, listening to the new human rights the Democrats have promulgated while ignoring the real and traditional ones. As my teacher Harry Jaffa once wrote, putting such things as full and permanent employment and free to medical care into the category of human rights is to attempt to remind mankind of its proper goal, the leap into freedom at the end of history, after the revolution. It is to remind mankind that its proper duty is revolution. By treating the totality of all the desirable things as if they were both possible and necessary, is to remind mankind of the heaven on earth that Marxism, Leninism promises. It marks those who oppose such things as reactionaries. These promises may be those of a God who has failed, but there are millions upon millions around the world who do not know that God has failed. The God seems to have converted great numbers. No argument against dialectical materialism can be successful merely by saying that it contradicts the facts of common sense or human nature. For we have spent years and years, decades, eradicating common sense and human nature. Boys are not or do not have to be boys. Girls are not and do not have to be girls. A small d Democrat can be a dictator. First Amendment was not meant to protect offensive speech. The Second Amendment was not meant to ensure individual rights. The crime is to kill terrorists, not to let them live and endow them. It didn't actually start yesterday or even in 1981. It started long ago, perhaps with the progressive movement. Think about what the Declaration of Independence truly says about human nature and the rights of man. It first appeals to fixed things, like the laws of nature and nature's God, and then goes on to state that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now look at the progressives' view, their worldview. I give you Woodrow Wilson, who in a famous speech in 1914 said this, quote, "The Declaration's general statements, its general declarations, cannot mean anything to us unless we append to it a similar specific body of particulars as to what we consider the essential business of our own day. Liberty does not consist, my fellow citizens, in mere general declarations of the rights of man. It consists in the translation of those declarations into definite action," close quote. Get that? It wasn't speaking to laws of nature and nature's God, permanent things, according to Wilson and the progressives. It was merely a document with a list of desiderata and particulars to be updated as needs and wants and desires may come. Wilson said exactly this, as I quote, "We ought to ask ourselves what there is in it, the Declaration of Independence, for us. There is nothing in it for us unless we can translate it into the terms of our own conditions and of our own lives. We must reduce it to what the lawyers call a bill of particulars. It contains a bill of particulars from 1776. If we would keep it alive, we must fill it with a bill of particulars for the year 1914, close quote. He would, in this speech, denounce the Declaration as, quote, a mere historic document, close quote. Nothing really in it for us. Needs to be updated, brought current, rewritten, if you will. That's how progressivism got here. That's how actual rights and the understandings of human nature got tossed out, and new rights and the changing of human nature could start to become fashionable. So when you hear a Bernie Sanders talk about the universal state health care in other countries, you hear applause. And what you don't hear is anyone asking, what American goes to Canada for a medical procedure? And what is the wait time in such countries for life-threatening medical procedures? It puts one in mind of what Winston Churchill once said. The vice of capitalism is the unequal distribution of blessings. The virtue of socialism is its equal distribution of misery. If you believe in an equal distribution of misery, you can easily praise the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Cuba, and Venezuela as easily and in the same breath as you condemn America. But I venture to say, thanks to the freedom of travel and the freedom of the press that we have, and that never existed in such countries as the USSR or Cuba or Venezuela, thanks to those rights which belong to free men and should belong to all men, we can truly see that misery for what it is. And with our own two eyes, we can see what blessings we have here. May they never be constricted, no matter how loud the scream, no matter how sincere the rant. No rant, after all, no scream, after all, was anything but sincere. And Bernie is sincere. So is his party. Are we? Let it not pass understanding that the countries that give out these new rights, like guaranteed income and free state health insurance, are the very countries that have abandoned and mocked the real, our human and civil rights. I ask again, Bernie is sincere. Are we? I'm Seth Leibsohn, 602-508-0960. We'll be right back. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about my friends at Guns Etc. They are true American patriots. They strongly support our president, and they have over 10,200 square feet of firearms and firearm accessories. Please take my advice and stop by their store, which is a symbol of American freedom, or visit them at gunsetcetera.com and have access to over $350 million in firearms merchandise.